The air in the mountains, a brutal expanse of rock and ice known locally as the Devil's Tooth, carried the metallic scent of corded and fresh blood. 6 men of the Special Air Service lay pinned down in a rocky depression, taking fire from insurgent positions on 3 sides. Their signal specialist was already dead. Their commanding officer, Captain Blake, bleeding heavily from a shoulder wound. The nearest air support, a pair of Apache gunships, was a harrowing 20 minutes out, assuming they could even reach this remote valley. A cruel cleft carved between towering, impassive peaks. Sergeant Davies pressed his back against the cold, unforgiving stone, his mind a precise register of their dwindling resources. 12 rounds remained in his magazine, a paltry count against the overwhelming odds. The staccato chatter of Kalashnikov's a grim chorus as the insurgents closed in. They had walked into a perfectly executed ambush, a trap sprung with ruthless efficiency. Now, they were to die here, their bodies abandoned to the elements, whatever intelligence they carried destined to be stripped away by the enemy. "This is it," the wounded captain muttered, his face ashen, drained by blood loss. No way out. Then it happened. A single crack, sharp and distinct, sliced through the cacophony of automatic fire. An insurgent on the ridge above them pitched forward, falling lifelessly into the dust. Before anyone could truly process the impossible event, a second shot rang out. Another enemy combatant crumpled. Then a third. Each shot precisely placed. Each target instantly neutralized. Within 30 seconds, 8 insurgents lay dead, each felled by a single, unerring bullet to the head or center mass, fired from a position no one could identify. "Who the blazes is that?" Davies whispered, his gaze sweeping the ridgelines, a desperate search for the unseen ally. No one answered. No one knew. The remaining insurgents were treated in disarray, their shouts in Pashto filled with terror. Speaking of an American ghost, the SAS team survived that day, extracted by helicopter 2 hours later, leaving their mysterious savior to vanish into the mountains. Believe it only brass shell casings cooling in the thin, hiding air more than a mile from their position. The official report, a meticulously sanitized document, mentioned only that the team had successfully fought off the ambush. No mention of the impossible shots fired from extreme distance. No acknowledgement of the phantom marksman who had snatched them from the jaws of oblivion. Some stories, after all, are not meant for official reports. Colonel James Ainsworth adjusted his ward, with cap against the late autumn chill as he recounted this tale to a small gathering at the Blackwood Fell Royal British Legion Club. At 70-2, his face was a road map of creases, his skin weathered by decades of sun and wind. Yet his eyes remained startlingly sharp, missing nothing. The years since his retirement from Army Special Forces had not dulled his mind, nor his meticulously preserved memories. The lads called their guardian Angel Ghost Hawk, Ainsworth concluded, taking a slow sip of his whiskey, a decent single malt. Nobody ever figured out who it was. Official channels denied any sniper team operating in that sector. Whoever pulled those triggers saved 6 British lives that day with shots most people would consider sheer fantasy. The men around him, a collection of local veterans and villagers, nodded appreciatively. Blackwood Fell was a small, insular community nestled in the northern Pennines, where military service was common, populated largely by former servicemen and their families seeking the quiet solitude of the fells after their time in uniform. "Hell of a yarn, Jack," remarked Arthur Pendleton, the owner of the local ironmongers and a former Army Ranger. But 3,000 meters in mountain conditions. Nobody makes those shots, not even the best in the world. Ainsworth's weathered face broke into a slight, knowing smile. "That's precisely what I thought. Oh, sir. Until yesterday, 20 miles outside Blackwood Fell, Morgan Thornwell, gasping from another nightmare, her body rigid, the sheets soaked with sweat despite the moorland chill. Her hand automatically reached for the K-Spear combat knife on her bedside table.
What's your
Her
background?
reflex honed by instinct before her anxious mind could fully assert
Still avoiding
itself.
my questions.
Safe.
Always.
Penniless. Her grandmother's hill farm. She forced her breathing to slow, utilizing the meditation techniques Drive, Crafted painstakingly taught her. In through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Out through the mouth for 8.
Damn it.
Repeat until the heart rate slowed, until the ghost retreated, momentarily, to the deepest shadows of her memory. Dawn was breaking over the eastern fells, painting her sparse bedroom in shades of pale gold. No point in attempting sleep again. The faces of the dead were close today, were insistent in their
Nobody
silent
can hit at this
demands.
distance in
Better
this
to
wind.
work until sheer exhaustion drowned out their spectral voices. Morgan slipped on worn denim jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and heavy work boots. That 30-5. Her body remained combat minus ready despite 3 years away from active service lean. Strong, moving with the fluid economy of motion that came from
Sir,
decades of
these conditions
specialist
make
training.
consistent hits
Hers,
impossible
any
today.
brown hair was cut practically short. Her face scrubbed clean of makeup, and her hazel eyes, despite the interrupted sleep, remained keenly alert. She moved silently through the old farmhouse,
bet,
a habit she could not break. 15 years spent in the shadows had permanently altered how she interacted with the physical world.
you
Even
as precise as
here,
you claim to
in the
be?
safest place she knew, Morgan moved like a ghost, leaving no perceptible trace of her passage. Eleanor Thorne was already awake, moving slowly around the kitchen with the careful precision of a
then,
woman
let's do
managing
this.
advanced arthritis. At 70-8, Eleanor remained fiercely independent, refusing to acknowledge the limitations imposed by age. Nightmares again, dear? Eleanor asked without turning, somehow always sensing her granddaughter's presence. Just the usual. Gran. Morgan replied,
serious?
pouring strong,
What?
dark coffee into a battered thermos. I'll fix the north fence line today. Saw some posts
these
down when I was
ghosts,
checking the property
that shot is
yesterday.
simply
Eleanor
impossible.
nodded, and knowing better than to push for details. 3 years since Morgan had returned to the farm, and still the wall between them remained not from a lack of love, but from secrets Morgan couldn't share and pain Eleanor couldn't truly reach. Take the rifle,
2,027 meters.
Eleanor said casually. Michael Fernandez, down at the next farm, spotted a wild cat near his lambs yesterday. Morgan nodded. The Macmillan Act 338 wasn't strictly necessary for a wildcat, that it gave her a legitimate reason to bring the weapon that had been her constant companion through 3 war zones. The rifle represented both her greatest skill and her deepest, most burdensome secret, and our leader. Morgan drove her weathered Land Rover Defender along the perimeter of the 600-acre moorland farm, the rifle case secured beside
Hit.
her.
Dead
The property
center.
had been in Eleanor's family for 4 generations, a sanctuary of rolling grassland and heather
Good
nestled
Lord.
against the brooding
Impossible.
fells. It was as close to peace as Morgan had found since her first deployment. She parked
Again?
near the damaged fence line and set to work replacing posts and tightening wire. Losing herself in the rhythmic physical labor, the methodical task occupied her hands, while leaving her mind free to continuously scan the surroundings, an ingrained habit from years of operating in hostile territory.
Possible.
By mid-afternoon, Morgan had repaired the fence and allowed herself a rare break, sitting on the tailgate of her Defender with a thermos of
30,
coffee.
38
On
confirmed.
impulse, she opened the rifle case, removing the Macmillan TAC 338 with the familiarity of handling an old, trusted friend. The weapon was a marvel of engineering. A bolt-action rifle chambered in 338 Lopu, a Magnum with a custom made carbon fiber stock and alloy bolt MCAF. HD scope specially calibrated for extreme long-distance shooting. It was a configuration few civilians would recognize or truly understand. Capable of precision that most shooters would consider physically impossible. Morgan ran
Not
her
possible
fingers
with this
along the
wind.
cold barrel, checking for imperfections more out of ingrained habit than genuine necessity. She hadn't fired the weapon in months. Not since the last time she'd visited the Blackwood Fell Rifle Club on the outskirts of the village. Tomorrow was Tuesday range day, but Blackwood Fell Rifle Club occupied along Harrow Valley nestled between two foothills. Originally built in the 1950s as a simple rifle range for local hunters and farmers, it had evolved over decades into a sophisticated facility, with shooting lanes extending out to 1,500 meters, the maximum safe distance given the natural backstop of the surrounding fells. Colonel Lane Swith had purchased the range 10 years ago after retiring from the military,
Morgan, a word, if you please.
transforming it into both a viable business and a sanctuary for veterans working through their own difficult transitions to civilian life. As a former sniper instructor and special forces officer, he possessed an almost preternatural sixth sense for recognizing shooters with truly exceptional talent. Morgan Thorne had caught his attention the first time she'd appeared at his range 3 years earlier. Something about the precise way she handled her rifle, the almost eerie economy of her movements, the complete absence of unnecessary adjustments. Like all true masters, she made the complex look utterly effortless. Today, Dean Swith watched her from his office window as she set up at her usual lane the furthest from the clubhouse, a solitary figure amidst the small group of shooters occupying the closer positions. She came every Tuesday, weather permitting, always alone, always intensely focused, never socializing with the other regulars. Ainsworth's attention shifted to the group occupying the central lane, 6 men in tactical gear that practically screamed private military contractor. Their leader was Commander Eleanor Finch, a former Royal Marine who now ran security operations for various multinational corporations and government agencies. Finch's team had reserved the range for specialist training, walking through various shooting scenarios at distances ranging from 200 to 1,000 meters. "All right, gentlemen," Finch called out, his voice carrying easily across the range. "This isn't your local village fate shooting gallery. These are real world distances against targets that won't stand still, waiting for you to find your nerve. Davidson, you're up first." Dinsworth watched the interaction with detached, professional interest. Finch ran a tight operation, pushing his men hard, demonstrating genuine expertise. This wasn't the first time his team had used the Blackwood Fell facilities for training. Dinsworth appreciated their business, despite Finch's occasionally abrasive manner. Morgan appeared oblivious to the group, entirely focused on her own meticulous routine. She began with dry, mindless firing exercises,
So he's
working
here,
the bolt smoothly,
in Blackwood
establishing proper cheek weld and breathing rhythm. Only after 20 minutes of silent, intense preparation did she load a single round into the chamber and prepare for her first shot of the day. Through her scope, she could clearly discern the 500-meter target, a standard silhouette with scoring rings. For her, this was merely a warm -up, a chance to reacquaint herself with the weapon's nuanced feel after weeks of inactivity. She controlled her breathing, allowing her heart rate to slow naturally, feeling herself enter the almost meditative state that always preceded a perfect shot. The TAC 338 roared, its powerful report echoing across the range. Through her scope, Morgan watched the bullet strike dead center in the target's head zone exactly where she'd intended. At the clubhouse, one of Finch's men let out a low whistle.
Then he's
"Nice
hunting me."
shooting, man," he called out. Morgan did not acknowledge the comment, already working the bolt to chamber another round. This wasn't about showing off or earning idle praise. This was therapy, the only form that had ever truly worked for her. 2 hours passed as Morgan methodically worked through her routine, gradually increasing the distance. By the time she reached the 1,000-meter targets, Finch's team had gathered to watch, their own practice temporarily forgotten. Even to experienced shooters, consistent precision at this range was profoundly impressive. "Mind if I take a look?" Finch asked, approaching Morgan's position with a spotting scope. She merely shrugged, neither welcoming nor explicitly rejecting his presence. Finch observed her next 3 shots, each striking within mere centimeters of the previous impact, despite discernible changes in wind conditions.
But I must insist you
Military
are not
background?
safe.
He asked casually, professional
been
curiosity evident in his tone.
Not since
Something
Kabul.
like that. Morgan replied non-committal,
ghost hawk.
not looking up from her rifle. Which branch? Does it matter? Finch studied her for a moment. Noting the deliberate vagueness, the careful control of information, he recognized the unmistakable signs of someone with a classified background. Someone who had operated in the shadows where affiliations on specific details remained. By necessity, unspoken, this not, he conceded, turning to rejoin his team. From his position near the clubhouse, Ainsworth observed the brief interaction, noting the professional respect in Finch's posture, despite the minimal conversation. It merely confirmed his
Then I'll
own
be ready.
long-minus-held assessment of Morgan's abilities and background, adding significant weight to a theory he'd been carefully developing for months. As the afternoon progressed, Finch's team moved to the 1200-meter range, attempting shots that pushed the absolute limits of their equipment and skills. One by one, they missed the targets, their frustration growing visibly with each failed attempt. "This is impossible," David's son complained after his third
Gran.
consecutive
Hi,
miss.
Gran.
"Nobody can hit consistently at this
loved
distance
coming
with
here,
this
didn't you,
blasted
dear?
crosswind." Finch studied the wind
Even
flags,
as a little boy.
noting the variable, unpredictable
troubled, my
gusts,
dear?
creating truly challenging conditions. Adjust for the wind shifts between your position and the first ridge, he
Just
instructed.
tired, Gran.
The currents have changed direction in the valley. Davidson attempted to follow the guidance, but his next shot still missed the target completely. One by one, each team member tried and failed to connect at the extended range. After the 12th consecutive miss, Ainsworth walked to the firing line, an amused expression on his weathered face. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying loud enough for everyone on the range to hear. "We have a situation here that calls for a professional touch. Any actual snipers
Rostov
present
is
today?"
dangerous,
The
Morgan.
challenge hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence from Finch's team. Morgan, who had been preparing to leave, paused at her vehicle, listening to the exchange. "With all due respect, Colonel," Finch responded, "these conditions are almost impossible. Variable 15- knot winds, changing air density from the altitude, mirage effect from the heated valley floor. Nobody's making consistent shots past 1,000 meters today." Ainsworth's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Try to back that up with a friendly wager. Commander Finch, say 500 pounds? Finch laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Easy money, Colonel. But who exactly is going to prove me wrong?" Ainsworth turned his gaze. "Finding Morgan by Hurlin Rover. What do you say? Miss Thorne, care to show these gentlemen what real precision looks like?" Every head on the range turned toward Morgan, who stood motionless beside her vehicle. For a long, silent moment, she said nothing, weighing the sudden, unwanted attention against her deeply ingrained instinct to remain unnoticed, unseen. Finally, with a barely perceptible sigh, she retrieved her rifle case from the defender and walked back to the firing line. "What distance?" she asked quietly, her voice low and even. Ainsworth smiled. "Let's make it interesting. 2,000 meters." A murmur ran through the assembled shooters. 2,000 meters was beyond the established lanes of the range, requiring a shot to a specially placed target on the opposing fell slope. A distance few civilian shooters would ever attempt, much less truly master.
must be for
The
the new
winds are
project.
gusting to 20 knots between here and there. Finch protested. Plus elevation changes affecting the air density. Temperature variances. 2,000 meters. Morgan repeated calmly, cutting him off as she meticulously set
Have
up
you
her
heard
rifle
anything
and
from the
beepled.
village, dear?
Ainsworth nodded to his assistant, who drove an ADV to place a standard silhouette target on the distant slope, confirming the exact distance with a laser ragnifizer 2020-7 meters. Morgan took her position behind the rifle, establishing her shooting platform with methodical precision. She spent several minutes observing the environment through her scope, watching the movement of grass and trees to read the subtle wind patterns. Noting how heat distortion affected visibility at various distances. Mentally calculating bullet drop over the extreme range. This is ridiculous. Davidson snorted quietly.
Good morning.
Even
Lovely day
military
for it.
snipers don't take shots at this distance, except under absolutely perfect conditions. Morgan ignored the commentary, lost
Eleanor is at
completely
the
in
north
her
end of the
complex
market.
calculations.
I'm moving to
At
intercept.
this distance, the 338 lop you around would drop approximately 20-7 feet from barrel to target. It would take almost 3 seconds to reach its destination, during which time crosswinds could push it several feet off course. Even the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself, would subtly influence the bullet's path. She adjusted her scope, meticulously dialing in elevation and windage based on calculations few shooters would understand, much less perform under such pressure. When she finally settled into position, the range fell completely silent. Ainsworth watched through a spotting scope, his face betraying nothing as Morgan controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with perfect, unwavering pressure. The TAC 330H roared its powerful report, decoying across the valley through her scope. Morgan tracked the bullet's theoretical path, waiting for the impact. At this extreme distance, the 3-second flight time felt eternal. Hit, Ainsworth announced, unable to keep the satisfaction from his
Morning,
voice.
Morgan.
Dead center.
Out early
Finch
for
rushed
patrol
to the
again?
spotting
Just a quick
scope,
run, Grant.
his disbelief
Nothing to report.
evident as he confirmed the impossible impact. Good Lord, he muttered. That's utterly impossible. Morgan worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing with a fluid motion. Again, she asked quietly. Ainsworth nodded, anew, profound respect in his eyes. Make it 3,000. The assembled shooters exchanged glances of open disbelief. 3,000 meters, nearly 2 miles, was beyond the effective range of most military sniper systems. Shots at this distance weren't just difficult. They were considered virtually impossible outside laboratory conditions. Ainsworth's assistant drove further up the foul slope, placing another target and confirming the distance 3,030-8 meters. Morgan repeated her preparation process, this time spending nearly 10 minutes meticulously reading the environment before making the final adjustments to her scope.
Rostov's men have
At
been
this
seen on the
astonishing
moor
range,
roads.
every variable became exponentially more critical.
Oh,
The
William.
bullet would drop almost 70 feet, requiring precise calculation of gravity's effect, combined with our density at different
You miss him, don't
elevations. And she finally fired. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. For seconds passed before Ainsworth's voice finally broke the tension. I hit 2 inches left of center. Davidson shook his head in open disbelief. That's not possible. Not with this wind. Not at that distance. Morgan stood, beginning to break down her rifle system with the same methodical precision. Without acknowledging the stunned expressions around her, she'd already drawn far more attention than she had wanted. It was time to disappear again. Miss Thorne, Ainsworth called out as she packed her equipment. A moment of your time.
I fear you are
Please.
right, Colonel.
Morgan hesitated, then nodded, following the older man toward the clubhouse, while Finch's team remained at the firing line, still silently processing the impossible feat they had just witnessed. Inside his office, Ainsworth closed the door and studied Morgan with a new, intense scrutiny. That wasn't just good shooting. Miss Thorne, that was something else entirely, something I've only seen once before. Morgan remained expressionless. I've had practice. I'd say so. Ainsworth leaned against his desk. The question is, where does a civilian woman get that kind of training? That shot at 3,000 meters? That's beyond special operations standard. That's something else entirely. When Morgan didn't respond, Ainsworth continued. Your technique reminds me of someone I knew years ago. William Thorne. We called him Eagle-I. Best shot I ever worked was during the Cold War. Berlin. 1989. He made an impossible shot that saved a lot of lives, including mine. A flicker of recognition, fleeting but discernible, crossed Morgan's face before she could suppress it. Ainsworth noticed immediately. You knew him, he stated. Rather than asked, I should go. Morgan replied, moving toward the door. My grandmother's expecting me. Ainsworth didn't try to physically stop her, but his next words froze her in place. Ghost Hawk, that was you in the Hindu Kush. Wasn't it? The shots that saved those SAS lads. Morgan turned slowly. Yeah. Her expression carefully neutral, despite the urgent alarm bells ringing in her mind. I don't know what you're talking about. Colonel. Yes, you do. Ainsworth's voice softened slightly. Your secret's safe with me, Morgan, but someone else knows too. Someone's been asking questions about exceptional marksmen in the area. Who? A man named Victor Rostov, Russian X-KGB, supposedly now legitimate businessman. He's behind the Garthdale Estates development project north of the village. Ainsworth paused. He specifically asked about female shooters with military backgrounds. Seemed particularly interested when I mentioned a quiet woman who comes to my range on Tuesdays. Morgan's body tensed almost imperceptibly, but Ainsworth, with decades in special operations, caught the subtle reaction. He had learned to read people's smallest tells. Why would an X-KGB officer care about my shooting skills? Morgan asked, her tone carefully measured, betraying nothing. That's what concerns me. Morgan, Rostov isn't just any former Soviet operative. During the Cold War, he ran a program targeting Western intelligence assets. He's specialist in identification and elimination. Morgan absorbed this chilling information silently, her mind already analyzing potential threats and escape routes, habits that never truly disappeared. No matter how long she'd been out of the field, there's something else. Ainsworth continued. An old colleague from MI6 contacted me last week. Island Davies, counterintelligence. Said they've been monitoring Rostov's activities since